David Kelly, welcome to the show.
It's great to be here. Thank you so much for having me.
Now, David, you built a $13 million SaaS business with only 9 employees. David, what is your secret sauce?
Yeah, it's kind of funny hearing you say that because I still in many ways can't believe it. And even though we've reached the site, there's so much more to go, right? So I'm thinking about what's next. And I think the milestone is a great one, but there's so much more to do that we want to build into. So I'd say the secret sauce that got us to this point are a few things. The first thing is really hyper focusing on what we build and how we build it. So a lot of our mantra with our AppSumo Originals products, which include TidyCal, SendFox, BreezeDoc, some of the others, is how do we build something quickly and iteratively, focused on simplicity, aiming for a market that seems like it has options of penetration in some way, whether that's price penetration or feature penetration or whatever it looks like, and then seeing what happens. And a lot of the time we actually fail. So I'm sure we'll talk about some of those, but our success rate of $1 million business from all the products we launched is about 40%, which is somewhere around 10x higher than a normal company.
Yeah.
However, that also means that 60% of our products have failed on the inverse. So there's a lot to learn from that.
The thing is, though, like a 40% strike rate is amazing. Like I was talking to, I think Roman. I did another interview. I'll stick a card up there. But Roman was saying that a lot of founders they get so caught up in they have one win and they think it was all down to skill and it might have just been
Yeah.
luck. But having
Yeah.
a repeated strike rate, being able to do it like nearly half the time, that's
Yeah.
amazing, mate. That's really incredible. So well,
Thanks, man. Yeah, I appreciate it.
I want to dive into the 40% that succeeded, and I want to dive into the 60% as well.
Right. Let's start with the 40% because it makes me feel better. So that sounds good.
Just before we do though, just before we do, let's kick things off with something pretty spicy. What is your most controversial opinion about growing a SaaS business?
I have so many controversial opinions, and I've shared many of them on podcasts or in my blog or elsewhere. I'm surprised in many ways that people actually still listen to me, and I haven't offended everyone in the SaaS market. I would say one of the spiciest takes I can think of right now off the top of my head is the over reliance on marketing. And this feeds into a larger spicy take, which is that we are incredibly, as SaaS founders and creators, we are incredibly, let's say, for lack of a better word, stupid about what succeeds in the short term and what succeeds in the long term. So, what I mean by that is a lot of people I talk to, and a lot of my experiences are that building a business, we overemphasize what we think we can do in the short term. So, we think we can scale it a lot faster. And it actually takes a lot longer than we think. And this is true even of really experienced founders. So making sure that we understand actually what happens and how to actually grow a business, I think is really critically important. And I think is so misunderstood in the world of tech. And with marketing, especially, I think a lot of that reasoning for, let's say, over reliance on the short term is because people think they can just pour marketing juices on the engine right away and they can start throwing money at it, it'll succeed right away. What we notice with our products is of the $13 million we've made, and I'll talk about this year specifically, of the millions we've made this year, of the hundreds of thousands of users that have signed up this year, of the 20 to 30,000 customers we've had this year to our products, roughly 60% have come from non-paid marketing activities, more
Ooh.
specifically non-intentional marketing activities. So we see a lot of our growth comes from product-led growth levers, building great products, doing these things that are outside of the traditional scope of marketing. So as someone who comes from both a product and marketing background, I often laugh at marketers who just think they can pour gasoline on a fire and expect it to just skyrocket a business right away. That's
Mm.
more often than not true.
I want to do a bit of a tactical deep dive into your approach to product led growth because I think you've got some really
Sure.
exciting techniques. We'll talk about that a
Yeah.
little bit later on. But it's interesting you say that because I had a mentor once who said there's no such thing as a silver bullet. Everyone's looking for a silver bullet, but there's no such thing. There's just a shitload of lead
Right.
bullets. And the more experienced I get, that's been true the whole way through my career. I think that's probably been true for you as well.
Oh yeah.
But it's amazing how many people are just looking for that one amazing thing that's suddenly going to overnight turn their business into a success story. And instead of chasing
Yeah.
that, you're probably better off just realize that it takes time. Even if you do everything right, it just takes time sometimes.
It does. It does. And I think a lot of it is I caution founders away from reading about these really amazing unicorns, Right. It's kind of like the highlight reel of comparison that a lot of us find ourselves in with social media, where someone looks more fit than us. They have like the amazing partner, and all these things with comparison are so challenging. And a saying I love is comparison is a thief of joy. And I think that is especially true in SaaS and startups. So when we look outside and we see a company like Facebook that just had hockey stick growth, or what appears to be hockey stick growth, although different behind the scenes, we compare ourselves to what we are doing right now. So a lot of my experience building these products is trying to be non-attached to the outcome and just coming up with a really great hypothesis and assuming that if my strategy and process is really good, that I'll eventually figure it out. It's kind of like flipping a coin 15 times or something. If I flip a coin 15 times and I want to get heads 3 times in a row, I'll increase my chances as I flip more and more and more and more.
So what? It's just about having a few more chances, a few more at bats. Is that the secret?
I think that's part of it. I think that's part of it. But I would say that is a very high level view of something nuanced. And what I'd say is a more nuanced thing is, are we defining the right strategy and foundation for how we think about SaaS products? So for example, I talk to a lot of different founders and I do a lot of different coaching, as you know, from companies ranging from $100,000 a year in revs to a couple million, few million. And even founders who have made or are making a few $100,000 a year make a really silly mistake. And that mistake is that they're over reliant on that silver bullet marketing channel. So when I talk to the founders of these companies, we actually go back to a lot of foundational questions. Who are my customers? Where are my customers? What do they want? How do we test and build repeatable marketing channels? How do we build better products that serve our ICPs so that the marketing channels are even less relied upon and there's more organic and natural growth? How do we get clear on team direction? How do we get clear on dynamics between the team members? How do we get clear on delegation of responsibilities? And many of these things are the quote unquote boring parts of the business that actually are so critically important to create a business of our dreams where we can step away from our day to day and really just let it operate through really well defined processes and clarity and alignment.
Is that the mistake you see a lot of founders making? Like, is that a pretty common, um, what would you call it? Just there's everyone has their blind spots. Is that something that that SaaS founders seem to have as a bit of a blind spot? They just think
Yeah,
that they
I
get
think
carried
so.
away with. Yeah. Okay. Okay.
I think there are two main things I see that founders make a mistake with. The first is I'm really surprised how many founders don't have clarity around a goal. I would say this is the most important thing. So, an analogy I often think about with business is, in order to operate a team in a business, I think of it like a bowling lane. The bowling pins are my goal. So, we all need to know we're throwing a ball at the bowling pins and what those bowling pins are. And then the bumper rails are kind of like the confines of our decision making, right? So, how we think about strategically our decision making. So, the first thing I see really often is that founders are just like, well, I want to grow a business. Like, I just want to build a business. And it's like, okay, what does that mean? Like, I just want to make more money. And it's like, okay, what does that mean? So, when we get really clear and quantifiable with our goal, we then have real strong alignment, which means that we can disagree.
Mm.
And there's a really important nuance with that, right? If we don't have alignment, then we're all paddling a boat in a different direction. And there's a lot of subjectivity to like, oh, I want it done this way, but a team member thinks it's better this way. And what might happen is I might get mad at that team member, but I really should be getting mad at myself for not being clear with alignment with the team member.
Mm.
So for our team at AppSumo Originals, for example, for this year, we have a goal of 26,000 new customers who have never bought an Originals product before. Doesn't include people who have bought previous Originals products and then buy again. We're just looking strictly at getting them in the AppSumo Originals ecosystem. So 26,000.
Mm.
You could ask anyone on my team what the goal is, and maybe they can't tell you the exact number, but they're like, oh, it's definitely new buyers. I think it's somewhere in like the 25,000 mark. Every decision they make and I make, they understand comes from that frame of reference.
Mm.
And I think that's the first thing. And then I think the second thing is, when we have the goal, we're not clearly establishing actions that impact the goal. So a lot of founders get really distracted by shiny objects. They're like, oh, well, I have this goal now, but like this thing seems cool and I want to do this thing. And it's like, well, what's the KPI impact of
Mm.
that goal? So when I think about perfection of a business, which I'm always aiming for, I will never get there, but I always think about it. I think about simplicity of focus. How simply can I make this explainable
Mm.
so that anyone from the outside can be like, oh, they have a goal and they do these actions, and these actions impact KPIs, which impact the goal. There's like really strong alignment top to bottom and bottom to top.
Hey, it's Ryan here. I'm glad you're enjoying the video. Listen, if you want to meet me or some of the people that I interview, you should really join the StartupSauce SaaS founder community. It's a private Slack group for SaaS founders based outside of Silicon Valley who are past the idea stage and want to focus on growth. About 30% of our members are doing over $1 million a year in revenue, so it's a pretty high caliber group. You'll get access to regular mastermind calls and workshops, and every week we share exclusive marketing tactics and resources that you can use to grow your business faster. So, if you want to give yourself an unfair advantage and learn from other SaaS founders who are 1 or 2 steps ahead of you, head over to startupsauce.com and sign up. I think there's a link in the description down below as well. Anyway, I'll see you in there. When you're coming up, like the not the counter argument to that necessarily, but the pushback I've had a few times is, okay, well, where did you get that number from? You know, did the CEO just pull it out of his, you know what, or is that just, have you plucked it out of thin air? Is that based on last year's results? Like when you come up with that figure of 26,000, what's the decision-making framework that kind of goes in behind that?
You know, it's a valid point, right? Because some people are like, well, I don't want to come up with a goal that doesn't make any sense. And I understand that. And I think there's a lot of truth to that. When we think about goals, we think about them in 2 ways, right? So what we're often doing with our business now, because we've been around for 6, 7 years, is we're building iteratively on the last year, right? So it might change, it might be a little bit more nuanced, but let's say my goal last year was 15,000 new buyers. This year, I'm like, well, I think we can get to 25,000 because of these concepts we have, or because of these strategies, which I think are really promising. Of course, like I just mentioned earlier, I'm also susceptible to over evaluating or thinking about the short term. So sometimes I'm wrong, sometimes I'm right. And outside of that, which is more relevant for new companies, because I'm sure there are people listening who are like, well, that's great. You have a 6-year-old company. Like, great, good for you. And I understand that. What I would say is true for smaller companies is when we create new products, which we create typically 1 to 2 new products every year, we don't really know what's going to happen, right? Like I have an upper range of excitement about that product that I can quantify as number of buyers or something. But I'm also really looking at the metrics to understand like where my baseline is of excitement. So for example, we launched a new product this year called BreezeDoc, which is a DocuSign alternative. So for e-signatures on documents. In the early days of the product, I was like, I have no idea what people are going to do with this product. I have hopes and I have dreams, but I don't know what's actually going to happen. So we just looked at the first month of data that came in and we're like, okay, this is a percentage of people executing a document within 7 days, sending a document to their recipients. This is a percentage of documents sent per week, whatever. We established different KPIs and then we use those kind of as baselines. So for really early stage companies, what I often recommend is maybe they don't even have clarity on a number or metric that they feel very strongly about. The first step is actually identifying something, because even if you're really wrong, moving in a direction will give you feedback to iterate that metric over time. So if I'm brand new and I'm like, well, I want to create a business, I want to get 100 customers by the end of the year. It gives me a North Star to march towards, as well as team members. And maybe I'm horribly inaccurate, but then I can establish in year 2 what my metric looks like. Or maybe I'm even doing it quarter to quarter. Hey, I want this amount of revenue this quarter, or I want this number of signups, or I want X or Y. I think about goals as what I'm excited about. And then we think about actions that lead to the execution of that metric.
We had in StartupSauce, we had a mastermind a little while back, and there was one guy who was really successful, a bit more experienced than a few of the others on the call, and he asked them, what's your target for the year in terms of revenue or number of customers? And I've forgotten what it was off the top of my head, but he said, you're not being ambitious enough. And so this is kind of the approach that he took, because on the one hand, there is the fact that people tend to overestimate what they can do in 1 year and underestimate what they can do in 5 or 10. But he was pointing out that you are better off being ambitious and falling short than failing to be ambitious enough in the first place, because they hadn't set ambitious enough targets and they weren't excited about it, and they were just kind of going through the motions and they weren't really sure what they were doing, and they were spinning their wheels, and that kind of bleeds into the team as well. If the CEO is not excited or the founder's not excited, why would anyone else on the team be excited as well? And so he was having problems with stuff. So So your approach of, like let's really amp things up, or this is what excites me. Does that kind of then factor into getting the rest of the team excited? If the rest of the team
Yeah.
is excited, you've got a much better chance of actually achieving it in the first place. So it becomes a self-fulfilling
Yep.
prophecy.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, you're so on point. And I think people misunderstand and don't understand what it means to be a CEO
Mm,
as they grow, right? So a lot of people probably listening to this podcast, maybe early stage founders, maybe like one or two employees, maybe some contractors, whatever. Maybe they're just alone and they just have co-founders along with them. So the role of a founder, very early stage in many ways, is to just like find traction, right? To like find traction of something. So if I were to think about creating a business right now, what I would do is think about some markets that excite me, some concepts that excite me. I would find who my potential customers are and I would go out and try to sell them. Hey, we have this product we're thinking about. Here's like a couple mock-ups of how it could potentially look. Is this interesting to you? And maybe they say yes, maybe they say no. And if they say yes, I'm like, great, give me $20 right now as a down payment. And that'll really show me you're interested. And as we build it, this will be discounted from your normal rate or whatever, right? This is very loosely concepted. But then as a business grows, what I think is really important for founders to understand is the role of a CEO and the role of a growing founder becomes how do I set a culture of expectation? So how do I help the team understand the how we operate as a team? Like what is important to us as values? Do we care about speed? Do we care about quality? Do we care about this vision, whatever it is? And then alignment on goal. So this is what I care about numerically. Right. And those two things combined, if we're doing those two things, even very early stage, setting a culture of expectation, matching our values and what we're excited about, setting alignment with our team on what we quantify as success so that every team member, or even just myself and my co founder, we understand together that we're moving in the right direction.
mm,
A lot of businesses I see, because they don't quantify success, because they don't understand the direction they're going, they end up just kind of like spinning in circles a little bit. And I would much rather say, hey, my goal is to get 100 customers. I have a few things that excite me. I'm going to launch these products. I'm going to grow these products and let me see where it goes in relation to alignment with the goal. I think that's way better than just being like, well, I have this idea. It's kind of cool. I just want to grow it. Let me just keep trying ideas out to grow it. And then we get to the end of the year and we're like, kind of flat idea. Business was
mm.
a little lame this year. We wonder why.
And then you don't get as motivated to continue with it, and then it starts this kind of vicious spiral downwards, right? In terms of, yeah,
Totally.
I get it.
Absolutely.
Well, listen, why
Yeah.
don't we take a giant step back for a moment? What is AppSumo Originals, and what are some of your products? Who are they for?
Yeah. When we think about AppSumo Originals, really interesting concept of a business, right? So the biggest analogy I can think of in many ways is how Netflix operates their business nowadays. So Netflix has this giant content library of different movies and TV shows, and I guess now games, which is kind of weird to me, but they have a lot of different things. And within that giant library, they have a lot of third party movies, right? So they go find distributors and different creators and license their movies, right? And some of those are Hollywood blockbusters like we've all seen that end up on Netflix. And especially in the early days, they did a lot of that. They did a lot of licensing. But they realized a few years ago that they want to create original movies and original series and all these like original content pieces and media pieces.
Mm,
And AppSumo Originals is very much like that. So we have a marketplace at AppSumo of third-party products that are less expensive alternatives to
mhm,
products on the market. And then AppSumo Originals specifically is the in-house creation business of
mm,
these different products. So for example, we create products like TidyCal and SendFox, which are alternatives to Calendly and MailChimp respectively. And then the rest of AppSumo goes out and finds partners for alternatives to whatever random products like AI products or whatever else. But my job specifically is to try to grow our AppSumo originals so that we are playing a larger and larger role in
mm.
driving people into AppSumo, much like Netflix has realized with their original content becoming a larger and larger pie. We're emulating a lot of that same model, but doing it in the SaaS and startup and tech world.
Fantastic. And so you've worked with So before this, you were working with Ramit Sethi at I Will Teach You to Be Rich, correct? Is that,
Yeah, that
yeah,
was a few years ago.
yeah.
Yeah, actually more than a few years ago at this point, and a couple jobs ago. But yeah, he's a super impressive guy.
So what stands out to you about ways that Ramit Sethi and Noah Kagan, the way that they operate compared to other founders, other CEOs, other operators?
Yeah, that's such a great question because I think we can learn a lot by how the best do it, right? And I've been very fortunate, as you said, back in 2013, to have worked with Ramit Sethi a little bit. Um, the role wasn't a long term role, and it wasn't something that I had direct exposure to him. So I saw a lot from the outside with
Hmm.
limited interactions on the inside. And then Noah, I've been very lucky to work with extensively for 7 years, so very very closely for a lot of that time. And there are two interesting things about it. One is they both approach leadership in different ways, in my experience, and building a business in different ways. But they've both built really successful businesses. And through Noah, I've been like very thankfully exposed to so many impressive people, right? So he's very close with Neville Medora, who I've met a couple times, runs a very successful business. Tim Ferriss is someone who runs a very successful business, friends of Noah. Andrew Warner is
Mm.
another one who I've met up with a couple times as part of Noah's gatherings. And they all do things differently from my limited perception of some of them, but my extremely deep perception of Noah compared to Ramit at least. What I would say they share is they work really hard. I don't think there's really a way for someone to build a tech business without working really hard. Right. So when I look at Ramit, I think what stands out to me is he is extremely data driven and like unemotional about decisions. Like everything is a very pragmatic decision from my experience with him years ago, right? And with Noah, I think Noah blends more of like his personality,
Mm.
right? He brings more of his personality to business. So the beauty in that and seeing how these different founders operate is that we don't have to be like everyone else, right? So there are similarities and I think working really hard is a great similarity between them. I think going after a business or building something that we're passionate about is another similarity. And I think really thinking about like a business strategically is a similarity. But there are just as many differences as similarities, and I think they show that beautifully.
I think that one of the dangers that people fall into with, like I was talking to a founder the other day who said, "Oh, Alex Hormozy said this, or someone said that, or Russell Brunson said this." Like, that's great.
Yeah.
That worked for them, but you're not them and they're not you. Like, you kind of need to sort of forge your
Right.
own path a little bit too. And I think there's a little bit of a danger in just trying to copy someone else as a founder
Hmm.
completely, because everyone has a different personality, everyone has different strengths and weaknesses. And I think it takes a little bit of courage to sort of go off on your own path. Having said that, there's no sense
Yeah.
in reinventing the wheel, is there? If there's this has worked for this person before, I'm in a very similar situation. Just try that as a starting point. I find, like, as a baseline, do something that someone else has already done before and it worked, and then
Yeah.
experiment from there, and then figure it out from there. You don't need to start from scratch.
Yeah. You're so right. And like, I once heard from one of my mentors that like everything in life is just a paradox, right? Everything is incredibly paradoxical. And the reason I mention that is in this case, I'm sure some people are listening and they're like, well, how can I be like them but not be like them at the same time? And I think that's really hard, right? And I think about it as a leader myself, where there are some leaders I really admire who I think have done like really exceptional work and are really impressive. And growing a business, I realize how hard it is. And I'm blown away by people who grow $100 million, $1 billion businesses, whatever. Like that level is just so impressive for what's required. And at the same time, it's like, how do I instill some behaviors or actions of healthy leadership that they represent while also interweaving my own personality?
Hmm.
And I think that's a paradoxical part of trying to find ourselves as leaders and find ourselves as business creators as well. So, not everyone has to create a really large, successful business. Some people want to, but maybe some of you as founders are like, well, I just want this to be a lifestyle business so I can live in Europe. Like I just want to make $1 million a year and revenue needs to be like 2 to 3 million to kind of hit that $1 million take home per year. And that's it. I don't need to grow a $1 bazillion business. And that's a beautiful realization that we can also incorporate our wants
Mm,
and our preferences, and that the business ultimately is not meant to be another job.
mm.
It's meant to be a creation of like a conduit of the lifestyle we want to live in many ways.
I think there's a lot of wisdom in that. I think when I was a kid, call it the tech crunch effect or whatever, but everyone wanted to
Yeah.
go and raise a ton of money, build this amazing billion-dollar company, and go off and be, Elon Musk. The older I get, the less appealing that is to me. But I do have friends, and they're like, you know what? It doesn't like a $1 million business doesn't excite me. Like I'm either
Yeah.
swinging for
Yeah.
the fences or nothing at all. And so there's nothing inherently wrong with that. It just means that the kind of business model that you want to pick needs to be a good business for you, a good business
Yep.
model for you. It means that the kind of the approach to growth needs to be a little bit different. If you want to swing for the fences, you're probably going to need a lot of money. If you need a lot of money, you need to learn how to raise it. You need to go and
Yeah.
make friends with lots of investors so you can go and do that stuff. But the older I get, like having something that sits on the side and spits off a few $1 million a year, and I can go and just chill out on a beach somewhere. That sounds wonderful. So,
Right. Right. Yeah, I get that.
well, listen, let's go back a bit because I want to talk about the kinds of products that you guys build
Mhm.
at Originals. So I know Peter Thiel once famously said that competition is for losers, but you guys deliberately, or maybe it's not deliberately, but you do find
Yeah.
yourselves competing in very competitive spaces up against some really big heavyweights like Calendly, like Mailchimp,
Yep.
like DocuSign. So what makes you like? Is that a deliberate strategy, and how do you win in such a competitive space?
Yeah, this goes back to like what we want our business to be, right? So like whenever I hear someone say something or like a founder or someone who's a VC or whatever, I try to understand like what is their frame of reference and what is the context. And my assumption from that Teal quote is that as a VC, he is looking for unicorns, right?
Mm,
So he doesn't want an iterative product. He wants something very different that he can make a ton of money, right? And there are some people who are really inspired by creating that type of business. So makes total sense.
mhm,
For us, when we think about where AppSumo originals fit within the ecosystem of AppSumo more largely, or Sumo Group as visioned by Noah,
mhm,
it's to help drive more people into AppSumo.
mm,
And as a flywheel, help grow the AppSumo ecosystem. Now, using the Netflix analogy, could we create a Stranger Things, which is just like a massive success, and people in some ways probably know Stranger Things better than the brand of Netflix, or they know Netflix because it's the only way they can watch Stranger Things?
mhm,
Yeah, there's a possibility for that. But I think like Netflix does with a lot of their like derivative movies and shows, and I don't mean that in a bad way, we
mm,
kind of do the same, right?
mm,
So when we think about the customer base for our product and we think about where we fit in, we realize that people come to AppSumo because they are looking for lower cost alternatives to other products on the market.
mhm,
So then it only makes sense to create products that are competitive to these big names because people recognize, like, hey, I have a Calendly right now, but oh, check out this TidyCal on AppSumo. This is 70 to 80% of the feature set that I need as a solopreneur or a small agency for a very minimal price.
mm,
And same with SendFox compared to MailChimp. So I'm not afraid necessarily of competition because we have the frame of reference for
mm,
us that people come from different products. If I was looking to create and my vision was to create the next bazillion-dollar business, I would think about it differently. I would go
mm,
into bluer oceans and kind of decide that way.
mm,
So whenever we read these books like Blue Ocean Strategy, or we hear someone like Peter Thiel talk, or we hear someone like me talk, I think we have to pass it through our experience and what we really want from a business
mm,
as well. So this might work great for my business, and we'll talk more about how it works great.
mm,
But for someone in different shoes, maybe they do want to go down the teal path, or maybe they do want to go down like the unicorn, unique blue ocean path. And that's okay too. We just really need to understand who we're serving, what we're trying to create, what is success.
mm. And this comes back to what you were talking about before about really, really, really deeply understanding who your customer is, where they hang out, how you can find them, how you can communicate to them. Because I know I've seen one of the traps that I've
Yep.
seen first time SaaS founders fall into over and over and over again Usually the more technical ones is they have this idea of feature parity. It's like they look around at their competitors. Oh,
Yeah.
that one does this thing, so I need to go and build this thing as well. And that one does this other thing, so I need to go away. And the thing is, like, usually they're really small businesses up against really big businesses. They don't have the engineering team. They don't have the budget. They don't have the resources. They can't keep up with all of these things. But they never stop and think about, like, do any of my customers actually need that thing? Is that useful to
Right.
anyone? They just rush out and build it because someone else has it. And so it's what I really respect about the way that you answer that question is, like, you've got a very, very deep understanding of who your customers are, what's important to them, what they focus on, what they need, and you deliberately go out to build products
Yeah.
that match exactly your target audience.
Yeah. And it's so hard, right? Like it's really hard. And I have empathy towards it as well, because what I'm trying to navigate as the GM is every single month we have somewhere between 200 to 500 pieces of feedback come in from our users. And some of it is really just like kind of simple and nice. Other is like pretty aggressive. So some of it's like, hey, if you don't do this, like I'm gonna refund. Or like your product is so bad. How can you not have this one feature? Whatever, whatever. We hear the full gamut. And one thing I think about with founders, especially a lot, is conviction.
Mm,
Understanding with conviction. And to like put it bluntly, just like having some balls. Like founders just need balls. And it's really hard, harder than ever before in this era of collaboration and not wanting to hurt anyone's feelings, to maintain the conviction required to make decisions that are hard. And I really like the analogy of sports for business, because I think there's a lot of interesting stuff around sports and how coaches and general managers and stuff
mm,
in sports do things. And one thing I heard a coach of a team say in American football recently, someone asked him a question and he's like, "Yeah, I have to make this hard decision and that's why I'm so well compensated." And I think that's really true, that we have to make these hard decisions.
mm,
So a lot of our decision making process, and we don't always get it right, is trying to maintain the vision of the business,
mm,
the alignment of the goal, what metrics matter in order to make our decisions. So going back to why I mentioned alignment is so important, the goals are so
mm,
important, the foundation is so important, is because if we're in the emotional middle of hearing from customers who are like, hey, do this or I'm going to refund, and then we go into our scarcity mindset and we're like, oh my God, we're going to lose some MRR, we're going to lose this customer. That is such a harder place to be than, hey, this person asked for this thing. This is a vision of our product. These are the KPIs of our product we care about. This is a goal we care of our product. Does it fit within that framework of decision making?
mm,
And when we take the decision outside of our experience or feelings in that moment into the objectivity of how we make decision making based on a process, then it's so much easier. So part of why I love kind of this definition of process and objective goals and clarity and alignment is because then I don't really have to think about it. Our team members say, hey, we should do this. And I could go to them and say, like, hey, I don't know if this fits right now. Or, hey, this is maybe a good idea for another time. But right now we're targeting this. And
mm,
we only can do 7 to 8 updates a month. And these are the ones we think have the highest impact on our KPIs, which impact our goals. We make the decision making a lot easier when
mm.
we do things like that.
That makes a lot of sense. How do you get your first few customers for your products? Because you've got quite a few. Do you have like a sort of a
Yeah.
standard playbook when it comes to launching a new product, or do you take a different approach every time?
So here's an easy truth. Once you start growing a business, it's much easier to keep growing it. That's like the easy thing, right? So we've been around for 7 years, and now when we launch a new product, we can go to all of our existing customers
Mm.
and tell them that we have this new product, right? And we did that this year with BreezeDoc, and in the first 6 months of BreezeDoc, we made I think around $90,000 in revs, right? So like it's kind of like a faucet we can turn on.
Yeah.
And I'm well aware that that is not realistic for many people. However, I do want to mention it because it indicates the importance of building a customer base over time that we can
Mm.
then upsell and cross sell. And I think there's a lot more of that that can be done than people actually think. Going back to the early stages of a business, and the most applicable one for us was SendFox. Back in 2018, we launched this product brand new, had no customers for it. When we looked at how we got our first few customers, we think about a couple things. One is, who are my customers?
Mhm.
Right? So we created SendFox based on an intuition we had that people probably wanted a cheaper version of MailChimp.
Mm-hmm.
So when we thought about that hypothesis, we went further down the path of like, okay, who are those people? So then we started going into our email inbox and we said, who sent a newsletter in the past 6 months from a MailChimp account? And we could just Google for that, right? Like we could just Google for newsletter or whatever in our Gmail inboxes. And we'd message them. We'd be like, hey, we have this new tool that is guaranteed 50% less cost than MailChimp. Are you interested? We would go to friends we knew had newsletters. We would reach out to like literally anyone we could think of who had a newsletter or knew someone who had a newsletter or maybe had like a distant relative that had a newsletter. We just like hit up everyone. And through that, we went through a lot of failure, right? So we realized that initially who are our customers that we thought were our customers were actually not our customers. We thought that we would really want to go after content creators who were big senders and wanted to cut their MailChimp bill in half. So we went to know his friends like Ryan Holiday, Shane
Mm-hmm.
Snow, Andrew Chen. And what we realized is they didn't care. They were like, yo, it's way better for me to spend $500 on MailChimp making as much as I am than having to deal with the sunken cost of trying to transition a tool to save $200 a month.
Right.
They
Okay.
just thought about it differently than we thought about it. So then we realized that there were maybe more hypotheses of who are my customers. So we started going after different types of content creators, different levels of content creators. And I think a lot of what happens in early stage business is we have these hypotheses and then we just kind of stumble our way to success with consistency, right? So over 6 months, like I busted my ass basically to try to meet with as many people as I could. And I remember just being in nonstop back-to-back meetings every single day. Most of them were useless. But when we do that with that flipping of a coin that many times, we eventually land heads.
Mm-hmm.
And then they tell someone, and then they tell someone. So then we realize that as we find this market, and then as we talk to this market and listen how we can improve the product, because the product was pretty shitty at the beginning, there were a lot of issues, a lot of people churned. We realize that through these improvements and focus on these customers, we'll eventually get there, right? But then we also have to understand where the cap is, right? So that's why we moved down to these other products like TidyCal, because we realized that SendFox was capping at a certain point, and we wanted to see, could we find and identify another product and come up with more hypotheses to test to see if we could really drive even more growth. So a lot of the early stages of business to me is very messy. It's very messy. But I think, need to have conviction with a concept and just go after that concept and just try to appeal to people. And then also understand when maybe we've hit the limits of that product and come up with other products.
And just talk me through when you launched TidyCal. Did you go back and then build on, like, you already had the SendFox audience to reach out to and say, hey, we've got something new. Would you like this? Or did you go through that whole process again, or kind of a blend of the two? Like, what was it like the second time around?
Yeah. This is where we kind of stumbled our way into some success and got lucky. And every business needs to get lucky to get where a 13, 20 million, 100 million, whatever level of business past a certain level gets to. So what we noticed with SendFox is part of what helped it grow is our customers acted as salespeople for us, right? And that's because we retained branding at the bottom of every single SendFox email and SendFox Smart Page and these things, right? So then we would find these customers and beg them to use our tool. And then they would send emails and their entire audience would see, oh, what's the SendFox logo? And then they click the SendFox logo. And then some of them would convert because they also have a newsletter, right? So there's a relationship there. Now, TidyCal is somewhat similar, right? Where the concept for TidyCal for me was I wanted a Calendly that was simpler and less affordable for like 2 years, right? No one built it. No one built it. I kept waiting for someone to build it. I was like, this is ridiculous to me that like a booking tool is $15 a month. Like there's no infrastructure cost. Like what are we doing here? Why is this so expensive? I don't want to pay $50 a month just for like friends to book meetings with me. It makes no sense. And then when I tried to sign up for Calendly and I was like, yeah, whatever, I'll just pay it. I can afford it. It's fine. I would use their interface and I'd be like, what on earth is going on inside this? Like none of this makes sense. I just want to like meet with homies. That's it. I don't want to have to like set up workflows and like conditional formatting or whatever.
Yep.
So we built that based on my own need, but similarly to SendFox, we realized that the viral nature of products is a
Mm,
really important lever to growing products, right? And I wouldn't say it's absolutely necessary, but it is kind of a like a hack, one of the
mm,
hack solutions I think about. So TidyCal, similarly, someone would share their TidyCal link with someone and they'd be like, hey, get my TidyCal, get time in my TidyCal here. And they would send
mhm,
them a tidycal.com link and they would see branding at the bottom and they would get email reminders with branding. So then people would see the flow. They'd be like, oh, this is really cool. I actually need something that's better for my meetings too, or I'm sick of paying Calendly. Let me check TidyCal out.
mm.
And going back to the earlier part of the conversation, that is how we have these products that, with relatively limited marketing spends, grow so substantially. That's how we have these products that 60% of our signups come from unpaid viral growth levers. We have these in-app virality levers built so that when it's shared, it helps build the network of interested people using it.
So is that kind of the secret sauce behind this stuff? You deliberately pick products that, a, there's clear demand for this. There's a lot of people that would probably like something that's just a little bit cheaper because it doesn't need all the bells and whistles. We can do a version that's a little bit cheaper, but it still has that viral dynamic. You're still sending a message to someone. So if
Yeah.
it's SendFox, I'm sending an email out. People are going to see it. If it's TidyCal, I'm sending a calendar request. Someone is going to see it. If I'm on BreezeDoc, I need someone to sign some paperwork, so I'm sending it to someone else. Is that something that you
Yep.
deliberately look for at Originals?
It's one of the factors,
Mm.
right? So like we actually have a product ranking strategy. And looking at 2025, we're actually probably going to create a couple more products. But our product rankings framework is always evolving. So I don't want to say this is what it'll always be as we kind of refine the process and get
Hmm.
better. But the factors we kind of look at right now are, what do we think is a revenue implication is one, right? So what do we think is the upside of revenue? Do we feel like this is extremely profitable, will drive a ton of revenue, or do we feel like this is a more niche product? In AppSumo's case specifically, right, for AppSumo Originals more specifically, we think about our ICP of solopreneur agencies. So we're like, okay, does a solopreneur agency like really need this product? Kind of need this product or not really? So that's one factor. Another factor we think about is ease of building, right? So we have a small 9-person team that maintains these products that are seen by 36 million people every single month, which is insane, right? I talked to a company recently that does $20 million a year in revenue and they have 90 different developers. And I'm like, what do these people even do all day? Like, I truly don't understand. Like, 50% of them must be doing like minor bug fixes, like 3 bug fixes a week or something. So we think about how we really can build these products with our team. Does our team have subject matter expertise or can we understand how to build this? Because there are some products that we just don't understand the scope of or can't wrap our head around the requirements or what it looks like, right? And then I'd say one of the third level levers is that virality aspect,
Mm.
right? So what is the in-app virality? So how do we think about the viral nature of this product to grow without us having to grow it through extreme effort or marketing spend or cold outreach or whatever? And then the fourth lever is really excitement from our team. How excited are we about this product? I think that is both underestimated and overestimated. And the reason I say it's partly underestimated is when we're excited about a product, and this has been discussed ad nauseum, but maybe people don't understand why people say do products you're excited about. It's because consistency is required to build products
Mm.
and build successful businesses. A lot of being successful in business, much like life, is consistently showing up and trying and doing things. And we are way more likely to be consistent and to put in effort when we actually like what we're doing. It's not rocket science, right? But then I'd also say it's overestimated because we sometimes fall in love with this concept of a product that we really need. And then there are like 2 people in the world that need it like we need it, right? So then our market is really small.
Mm.
And maybe those 2 people in the world are willing to spend $1 million each. And then it's great, profitable business. But most of the time, it doesn't work like that. So those are the 4 different philosophies or levers or factors in our ranking algorithm for how we think about new products. And it isn't always a science. Sometimes we'll have ranking algorithms that give us results and we're like, we're not really feeling that. What's maybe the third or fourth suggestion in that list? But we often start with our ranking algorithm to get a baseline idea of where to go.
It's funny. I've heard two very different schools of thought on this too, because
Yeah.
there's the scratch your own itch school of thought.
Hmm.
I have a problem. I can probably make it easier. The same approach that you took with TidyCal. Like, surely there is something out there that is cheaper and easier to use. And why has no one built this yet?
Yeah.
At the same time, I've also seen a lot of people scratch their own itch, and they're one of those two people that has that particular need, and they can't find the other
Yeah.
guy in the world. So you've got. Are you very, very meticulous about following this framework that you've got for just objectively deciding, is there a business in this, or is this just something that I want to build for myself? Like, and have you ever gone astray? Like, talk to me about some of the products that you've tried, that maybe didn't work out or weren't as successful as those ones, and what
Yeah.
what, what did you learn from those? Like, what was different about those?
It's so hard. It's so hard to build a successful business. And I want to start there in my answer to your question, because I think we need to remind ourselves that, right? Like, 4% of SaaS companies reach $1 million. The average time it takes to reach $1 million business for those 4% that do, anywhere from 9 to 38 months, right? So we come up with a business idea. There's only a 4% chance of that business idea hitting $1 million. And then even if we hit $1 million, it's going to take us somewhere between like 1 and 3 years to do it, of like working really diligently on it, which is depressing in many ways, right? Like, that just sucks.
If you actually run the math on that, yeah, it's not it's not a high strike rate, is it?
Right. So with that said, and the reason I start there is because we're still refining our process, right? Like, as I think about 2025, and I'm putting together a one pager right now for our team to align on what 2025 looks like, to align our KPIs, to align our vision, to align our strategy behind the vision and the KPIs. One of the open questions I have right now is, how do we increase our rate of success and our ranking rate, right? Because here's the part that literally no founder wants to hear, what I'm about to say. And I'm sorry in advance, but it's what we've noticed to be true. We have launched 8 products, I think. I don't know. Some of them I truly try to forget because they just didn't land. But we've launched these 8 products. Every single one of them, according to our ranking algorithm, had a similar likelihood of success, right? So we had this product, Sleek Bio, which we thought of, which was an alternative to Linktree. And we're like, oh, Linktree, like, again, like $15 a month for just like a basic landing page that looks terrible on Linktree. Like, we can create something way better. It didn't really succeed. We created a tool called Email Badge, which is based on email signatures and creating beautiful, simple email signatures. Again, didn't really succeed, but some of the indications were there on the revenue side, the ease to build side, the excitement side, et cetera, et cetera. The other tool, Shorty SMS, which was going to be like the SendFox of sending SMS messages. So marketing SMS built in a beautiful, simple platform. Again, didn't really land. And they all didn't really land for different reasons, right? Sleep Bio, we realized the market was really crowded. Tons of people have created link and bio tools because it's very easy to create. So there are a million options out there. Right around the time we launched it, just bad timing, the market got flooded with them, right? This was early to mid pandemic days. Then we also had Email Badge, and we're like, well, we just can't make it look that great because there are so many email inbox providers that we need like a dedicated team just to make it look great in like Outlook 2006 versus Gmail, right? And then we were relying upon specific systems that we were trying to get our signatures to work with. Shorty SMS, we realized the cost of SMS messages prohibitively expensive, right, compared to email marketing, like literally 100 times the cost per deliverable of SMS. So the reason why I don't think every founder wants to hear this is building a business is unpredictable. We have these 4 to 5 factors we consider, but there are literally millions of factors for why a business is successful. And some of them we can articulate or we can monitor and use as part of our framework. But sometimes it just doesn't work as well as others. And I think that's why remaining somewhat non attached to just finding success is so important. Like, next year when we create products, it's like, okay, let's create some ones that we think are good. Let's maybe add a couple other ranking factors, but we're never going to get 100% certainty on if a business is going to be successful or not. So let's just try it and let's see where it goes. And let's come up with a plan to launch it. Let's come up with a plan to improve it. And then let's come up with a plan of milestones so we know, do we continue or do we shut it down? And what does that whole process look like? So I hate to disappoint those who are like, oh man, I just need to work harder and figure out this milestone. Part of the excitement and the beauty of business, in a frustrating way, but a true way, is that it's like a giant puzzle we're all trying to solve together. And some people solve the puzzle quicker because they're either lucky or a lot smarter. Like someone like Zuckerberg is definitely a lot smarter than I am. And some of us take a while to solve the puzzle. And then some of us get like a shitty puzzle that can't be solved. So it's kind of like the puzzle we get and then how we approach the puzzle that we're given.
Sometimes you often see in the SaaS world that people take the scratch your own itch approach, and they're often software developers. And there's a
Yeah.
finite set of problems that most software developers are exposed to on a daily basis. And most of those have already been solved by other software developers because they saw them first and did something about it.
Mm-hmm.
So one bit of advice that often comes up a fair bit is, in the same way you tell entrepreneurs to get out of the room, you need to tell software developers to get outside your industry, go and make friends with people who are in different spaces. I was talking to a guy the other day.
Yeah.
Some guy in Canada built a $20 million a year business doing learning for the oil and gas industry, because
Wow.
there's and like that's not something that I had ever thought about before I got on a call with this guy.
Right.
Ever. That's just not something that ever crossed my mind. Massive problem, lots of money to solve it, lots of money riding on, because there's health and safety implications and all sorts of stuff that go with that. So that's a
Yep.
massive problem that needed to be solved, and nobody else was solving it. But yeah, we need another photo sharing app. We need another, so there's
Right.
there's that kind of a dynamic at play as well.
You're so right. And I'm so amazed all the time by how many businesses people run that are like wildly successful, which no one knows about. Like there are just so many, and there are so many ways to make money, right? Like here's something I would, so if someone listening to the show, please create this and I will be your first customer. A great example of like random businesses. I hate selling stuff on Craigslist and Facebook Marketplace. I listed on there. I have these surfboards which I don't need, which I shouldn't have bought in the first place, but I don't know. It's a story of my life. And I just am trying to sell them on Facebook Marketplace and I'm having to create the listing. No one buys, or someone sends me a stupid message and I have to deal with this. And then I have to meet a person. It's all just sounds very annoying. Someone needs to create like a business that's just college kids will sell your stuff for you. And I'll give them like a 30% cut, 50% cut. I don't even care. I just don't want this stuff in my house anymore. Right. And that's one example. Another thing is, because I love to surf, I wish someone would just give me a way for me to input some of my data about surfing that I love. So where to go and where to surf based on certain conditions, and tell me where to surf, right? Like an algorithmic output. But you're right that like these wants that we have, like these are kind of niche wants. However, sometimes we don't realize that instead of creating another photo sharing app, instead of creating a social media network, we can create things that require, as Kevin Kelly said, just 1,000 true fans to become a successful business. Are there 1,000 people in San Diego where I live that would pay some college kid to list stuff on Craigslist? Maybe. I don't know. But I would say there's probably at least a couple hundred. Could you make a profitable business from that? Maybe. I don't know. There might be some margin concerns and other things. But like there there's a there's a way that I think we can build businesses that is a little unconventional that people maybe don't think about.
My old business partner had a really interesting situation. So he was the head of marketing for a startup that was making a nootropic product. Like you see in the movie
Yeah.
Limitless, you're taking
Oh yeah.
smart pills and all that kind of
Everyone's
stuff.
on nootropics these days. I
I
swear to
know.
God, I see this stuff at Sprouts, farmers markets, like everywhere.
There's always, yeah. So this was a few years ago now, but the product was still in development, and like everything, it was taking a lot longer than they'd anticipated, and they had to do trials, and they had to go back and
Yep.
fix this thing. It was just dragging on and dragging on. It's like, guys, what do you want me to do? I don't have a product to market. What am I supposed to do all day? And so his whole task then became, okay, well, what I can do right now is I can build an audience so that when I do have a product to launch, I'm not just launching to an empty room. I've got people who, are kind of they know us, they like
Yeah.
us, they trust us, they respect us. They're ready for this product. We've built up this anticipation, and they're ready
Yep.
to go. And it sort of feels like more and more like as Originals grow, like that audience of people that have already used one or more of your products before, had a great experience, like the same avatar, you can kind
Yeah.
of go back and sell to the same audience over and over and over again. How important is building an audience first when launching a
Hmm.
SaaS product?
I don't think it's necessary, but you're right. It is a way to go about it, right?
Mm.
So like we need to start somewhere.
Hmm.
And with SendFox, like we just again grinded. Like I just hit up everyone I knew who could potentially be interested. A lot of people were not interested. The people who were interested used our products, and a lot of them were like, "Well, this is really basic SendFox, and I'm out." But eventually, we were able to get enough to hit that inflection point of growth, right? And that doesn't always happen. And again, like we talked about, 9 to 38 months for $1 million business. I think it took us about 24 months to hit $1 million, something along those lines. Now, where building an audience becomes an advantage is if, and this is a very important if the audience matches the ICP for the product we're building, it makes life a lot easier. A lot easier. A lot of times people build audiences that are irrelevant to what they're building, right? So then it's like, well, I wasted all this time building an audience, but like these people aren't spending any money on my service offering. So I think we have to be intentional with how we build an audience, right? So like the reason why we were able to create BreezeDoc and send a quick email out to our existing list of a few 100,000 users and make $90,000 in 6 months is because we had a relevant audience that were interested. If I were to send this audience an email for nootropics, to your point, they probably wouldn't really want it, right? So building an audience can be very helpful as long as we are targeting the right audience. But I actually think if we're targeting the right audience for something we know we're going to build at some point, great long-term play, really
Mm.
smart long-term play, and it'll save you time. It's
Mm.
kind of like doing your homework really early in the semester. Like you can do it a little bit better, and then you could chill when it gets close to test time.
You know, every year that was my plan, and not once did I ever actually get around to doing that.
Right. Yeah, I understand that.
Couple of last questions, David. Talk to me about hiring. So, if you've
Mm,
managed to, like you said, you've got, was it 36 million people? What was the stat? Because
yeah,
you've got a
30
team of
roughly
nine,
36 million people a month use our Originals products.
and you've got
Yeah.
a team of less than 10 people to do
Yeah.
that, to manage that
Yeah.
all. So when it comes to hiring, I know a lot of people perhaps watching this have made some hires before that didn't work out. And
Yeah.
they got a bit gun shy about it, or
Yeah.
they have
Us
hired some
too.
people, but they're not quite hitting the bar. Like, what advice
Yeah.
would you give for people? What have you learned about hiring people that maybe might be useful for anyone watching this or listening to this?
Yeah, I have so many thoughts on hiring. One thing I'm really obsessive about right now are comp plans. Been thinking a lot about comp plans for senior leaders and
Mm.
other C levels as we start to grow and build senior level teams. But regardless of that, we've also made bad hires. And I think hiring is one of the things I see founders struggle with the most. And there are two reasons for this in my mind. First is founders aren't clear on what success is for that role.
Mm.
They just kind of know they need someone. So I have a client I coach, and he's awesome. He runs a great business. But one of his problems and challenges is anytime he just doesn't want to do anything, he's like, "Hey, I think I need to hire these 6 more people by the end of the year." And I've worked with him for a while, so then I see that he hires one, and then like he's not doing a good job, and he kind of set him up for failure, and then he has to fire him. It's just like this whole process, right? Rinse and repeat a couple times.
Mm.
So we need to understand before we hire what is success for that person. So I'll give you a great example. This year, up until this year, we only had 7 people. This year in April, we hired 2 more people. We hired a front end designer, and then we hired a full stack dev,
Mhm.
right? So what I said is, hey, SendFox has kind of plateaued, but I think there's a lot of upside to grow SendFox again, to add features again, to make it better again. We know the market of MailChimp, of Beehive, especially, who's killing it nowadays, ConvertKit. We know the market is potentially there. We know our product is weaker than it can be. Why not just hire people to help us build SendFox? So what I looked at when I put together a hiring plan is what do we want them to do? And what is an indication of success? How do we know they're on the right track? And in this case, my indication of success was actually not as granular or as nuanced as it normally is. My indication of success was, hey, I want to release these features that I think are really important. I want them to do a good job of it. And I want to see some upwards trend of growth within X time, right? And I gave more time because development typically takes more time. So within a 6-month period, I just want to see us start going up. So we're now about 6 months in, and we have started going up with SendFox a little bit, and the quality of the tool is better, right? So when we're clear on where we put these people and what is success, that typically is most important foundationally, because then we can interview people and we understand, hey, what is the metric I'm looking for? What is an indication that they can fit within this role? I think that's part of it. I would say the second thing that founders don't do well from hiring, and again, a lot of this is based on my own experience of failing, figuring it out. I'd say the second thing that we don't do well with hiring is we just expect things like way too quick, right? So if they're not adding value after like 10 days, we're like, wow, man, this is like bad hire. And we forget as founders that we are the most invested person in the company, right? We get the most money, whether it's via salary that we pay ourselves or because we have like primary equity and control. Other people aren't as invested and they don't have all the institutional knowledge from literal zero of the product that we have. So we need to also be understanding of like, hey, what are the milestones along the way of success? And it doesn't mean that we keep people who are C performers around forever. If we're clear with what success is, and then we can identify milestones and we talk to the team member about what are milestones along the way, then it makes performance conversations a lot easier, right? Then we understand if they're moving in the right direction, and we also make better hires. And with all that said, sometimes hires just don't work out or people change over time, right? Like we're all unpredictable. People's lives change. They have kids and families, and sometimes people who are great are no longer great. And that's also a hard situation.
Do you have any red or green flags that you look for that would indicate
Mm.
pretty early on this person's going to be amazing? This person, they're not going to work out long term. Like, is there any indicators or any rules of thumb that you use for that?
It depends on the role. I think what I'm always looking for from a leader perspective is like, how do I feel like this person integrates with our team? So both kind of technically, how does their skill set fit in, and also culturally, like, do we like working with this person? So, for example, I went away for 2 weeks to Greece earlier this summer. It was awesome. One of the things I really missed was I really just like missed our team and like talking to our team. I really like our team. I think we have a really great team. And I would say that's a huge green flag. I would say red flags are probably what everyone sees, right? Intuitively, we know it's like giving them tasks and they just don't do them. They're not responsive. They deliver lower quality. A lot of those we should be able to tell through interviewing. But again, interviewing is only part of the thing. Sometimes we just make hires and it just doesn't work out. And I've experienced that so many times, right? Like I'd say I've failed with hiring more than I've succeeded. And I would assume most founders probably agree with that. It's very hard to make good hires, especially early stage startup hires and foundational team member hires. Really, really hard to get right.
I think there are some people, and I've had this experience, like interviewed great, really strong, except that they're not a fit for an early stage startup because it requires a very
Mm,
different mindset, just a different personality type. I think in general. Um,
yeah.
one quick story I did have. So Sonny, who's the community manager, and kind of joke
Yeah,
that's sort of
she's awesome.
expanded into being the everything manager, but she said something to me. Would have been maybe 6 months after she started, like fairly early on. And I asked her, "Hey, do you know how to do this?" And it was something like video editing or doing some designy stuff, completely outside of her job description. That was not ever anything that had come up
Mm,
before. But it's just like, I
yeah.
don't know. Maybe she does know how to do it because I don't. Sonny, do you know how to do this? And she said, "No,
You're
but I
just
can."
hoping she does.
Well, here was her answer. She said, "No, but I can probably figure it out." And to me,
Mm,
that is a massive green flag, especially for an
yeah.
early stage startup. Someone who will come in and say, "I don't know how to do the thing, but I can watch some YouTube videos. I can take a stab at it. I can probably find some tools. It's not going to be 100%, but I might get it to 80%. And most of the time, 80% is is a hell of a lot better than having to go out and hire someone else, or find someone else, or just to get some
Yep.
job done. So, are there any skills that you feel that every founder should learn or should have? Like, are there any non-negotiables there?
I mentioned this earlier in the call, but I've been thinking a lot about it. And it's probably another hot take, spicy opinion. But I'm wondering the interface between collaboration and decision making, right? And the reason why I say this, especially relevant for founders, is a lot of founders in the old days, and this was probably an extreme, were just like kind of dicks. They were just like bulldozing and steamrolling everyone's opinions, and they're like, "I'm the boss. This is how it goes," and all those things that went along with it. But now it feels like we've swung to the other side a little bit, where founders are so hesitant to make decisions. They're afraid to make decisions, right? And I think about this with myself and a lot of founders I know who we're worried about our team and we want to be people pleasers and we don't want to defeat our team or make our team feel defeated so that they do less things or whatever the reason may be. But I'm wondering and I'm starting to understand and think about like how does it look like to be a leader who leads with conviction and does things kind. I have a mentor, another mentor who I talk to pretty often, and one of her pieces of feedback is like kind is direct, right? So like we can be direct and we can be kind and we can do both of those things together. And I think for founders, we need to understand very importantly, and this is always a dance, we need to understand when we listen and when we take action, when we abdicate responsibility and when we actually have to step up and make decisions because the buck stops with us. And it can be great to collaborate and listen, but ultimately, if we feel very strongly, the rest of the people around us may not know the full context. And by abdicating our responsibility or trying to keep people happy and our team members happy, we lose sight of really focusing on building and growing the business and making decisions to build and grow the business. So I would say like a reflection and a contemplation on those differences are huge for founders. I would say another skill set that founders really have to understand is again, how to build like goal alignment is so important. Even if they're a solo founder, like what is the indication for them of success so they know they should move on from an idea or they should double down on an idea and pay their first employees, find their first employees. I think that's critically important. And I think a process of testing and iterating to understand how we find traction and product market fit is related to that as well and is so critically important for founders.
Do you have a framework like that, or a mental model of finding that traction, or what traction looks like? Is there an approach that you take that's sort of kind of cookie cutter and works in all situations, or is there a more nuanced approach? Like, how do you do that?
It's a little more nuanced depending on the product,
Mm,
right? So we establish what our KPIs for each product. And I mentioned this a little bit earlier, but the nuances of each product differ product to product, right? So sometimes we go with like a more intuitive feeling, right? So what's interesting to look at with our inflection points of growth for our different products is TidyCal was relatively successful at first. However, it was also arguably like just kind of okay. And then when month, I think it was around 18 hit, it hit a huge hockey stick inflection, right? And then month like 26 of TidyCal hit another hockey stick of inflection. So sometimes we set these frameworks and we just don't
mm,
know. And like the framework needs to be more intuition based in addition to some trackable metrics and maybe milestones along the way.
mm,
But we think about decision making with that framework a little
mm.
bit.
I had a mentor once who said, so the rule is 3 months and $1,000. I'm not going to spend more than
I
a
like
thousand
that.
dollars to prove out an idea, and I'm not going to spend more than
Yeah.
three months on it. And there's a lot
I
of
love
wisdom in
that.
that. But well, here's the thing: like, if you had gone 3 months in and looked at the numbers and gone,
Mhm.
it's just kind of okay, and
Yeah.
you didn't really see the hockey stick until month 18, like you had to sort of have, like you were talking about, some conviction. No, no, no. Let's stick with this. Let's
Yeah.
stick with this until you get to month 18. I think maybe my reflection on that, at least, is like I used to be pretty brutal about 3 months, $1,000. That's what my mentor said. But I think in the SaaS world, sometimes things just take a bit longer, and it takes
Agreed.
time for word to get around. It takes time for people to figure things out. It takes time for you to fix any bugs or roll out that feature or just get that thing built that's going to suddenly, make it really take off.
Right.
Yeah. Do you have any reflections on that?
I do. I do. What you made me think of is actually not a direct answer to this, and I think it inspired something that's still kind of noteworthy, right? Where business is so much messier than I'm making it seem, with just like these clear articulated details of like how to think about business, right? Like there have been so many times as we built our products where I'm just like, I have no idea if this is going to work. I don't even know if this is a good decision. What am I even doing? Like, what's the point existentially, and just questioning everything, right? But I will say, what I really enjoy, and there are different types of people, what I really enjoy is building things with a good team.
Mm.
So my belief is that if I can build a good team around me, and in the early days, I was just 3 people, by the way. That was myself and 2 others who are still with us today and are exceptional at what they do. Really, really great. If I can just build a great team, like we'll figure it out together and we'll support each other through this process of trying to build this product. So maybe not the 3 months, $1,000, and it's so nuanced depending on the product. Although I think that's a good framework to use, of setting some type of time frame and setting some type of limitation to help us make go or no go decisions. But having the team there is really just so much fun when
Mm.
we really sit back and think about it. And it's funny because with the $13 million we've made over the past X years as top line revenue, and when we look at some of the bottom line revenue metrics that we've made for AppSumo, where people purchase subsequent products that were brought into the ecosystem by us, we're probably somewhere in the $30 million range. What I look back is I'm proud of these metrics and proud of these numbers, but what I'm most proud about is how our team has grown. Like how we empower all these individuals, these team members, to do exceptional work, and how we've like all kind of gone through the insanity of trying to build a SaaS product together and doing it more than once.
Yeah. Several times over. On that note, David, are there any tools or books or resources that you would recommend to other SaaS founders in general? You can give a bit of a plug to some of the Originals products if you want.
Right. Well, a couple things come to mind. I'll leave the originals for later. I want to give really good recommendations. Art of Accomplishment is a podcast I really like. I think it's about the softer side of leadership and how to be better leaders emotionally. I think
Hmm.
there's a lack of maturity among a lot of leaders. So I think we need to show up as mature leaders to be the best leaders. Really like that. Chief Sumo, who I've worked with for many years, has some great resources. His book $1 Million Weekend came out a couple months ago ish. He talks a lot about some of the frameworks that we have done together for TidyCal and SendFox and many of these things. So you'll see a lot of the things I'm talking about, but echoed in like a really beautiful, practical, pragmatic book. I would also say I really, as like a random couple recommendations, um, I really have enjoyed some psychology books recently, specifically The Female Brain and the Male Brain. Helps me understand more deeply how men and women work, and especially as we have these diverse teams, how we can show up as the best leaders for different types of people from different locations and upbringings and things. And then finally, we do have the Originals products, right? So tidycal.com, sendfox.com, breezedoc.com are all great, less costly alternatives. If you want to check them out, go for it. They're free to start. If you want the paid version, they have a 60-day refund guarantee, so really no risk to try it. And then my personal blog is dmkthinks.org. So I write about some of these theories and learnings and ideas on my personal blog, and you're more than welcome to check them out.
I'll put links to all that stuff down in the description below, by the way.
Sweet.
But David, if someone wants to get in touch with you, or is your blog the best way to do that, or LinkedIn? Like, what's the best way for people to reach you?
Yeah, LinkedIn has become like such a cesspool of chaos that I actually ignore most of it. So I don't go on there too much, but my blog, dmkthinks.org, there should be an email address for me somewhere along there. So feel free to check it out and shoot me an email or leave a comment on my blog. And I would love to hear from people.
Fantastic. David, it's been a pleasure, buddy. Thanks for coming on the show.
Thanks so much for having me.